Hi, Steve here, the Laughing Stoic. Welcome back to the channel. My apologies for the lack of contributions in the last few weeks. I've actually had influenza and been out of town and various other excuses, all of which are good ones I can assure you. But now we're back on track and hopefully we'll get a bit of content out each week. Anyway, it's given me some time to think about what to talk about next. And I guess it might be cogent to return to the topic of emotions. Now, I'll put a link in the description box below, taking you back to that video which described the sort of emotional process physiologically in the brain and the way that it affects our brain state and how it operates under various emotional stimuli, you might say. So that is worth reviewing before looking at this video. If you haven't seen it, definitely take a look there first. But otherwise, let's plough on. So emotions, our life is, notable for its emotions. Whilst we're rational creatures to some degree, we're also emotional creatures. And to a large degree, how we manage our emotions determines what sort of person we're seen by other people. So people may be very, very smart or have a great deal of athletic ability or be particularly handsome or beautiful. But ultimately our comments about them and our relationship with them tends to rest on how they deal with their feelings and how they deal with us with their feelings. So emotional management is kind of at the centre of social life. And as you get older, there's kind of an expectation that you can manage your emotions a bit better. So handily, this is a focus of Stoicism. So we've talked about the Stoic position, that being having an overview of yourself, the dichotomy of control, where you can only control what you think to a large extent and do completely, and the fact that you need to pursue a virtue ethic within a Stoic framework. But nonetheless, one of the biggest challenges to this is emotions, and the one that Stoics most talk about in the literature is anger. Getting captured by anger and doing terrible things. This is probably because they were elite Romans and they could get away with doing quite a lot when they're angry to their slaves, or Marcus Aurelius was an emperor and he could do pretty much what he liked when he got angry, and people wouldn't have much capacity to stop him. They pretty much have to do what he said. So controlling your anger is certainly something that both Seneca and Marcus Aurelius talked about in more detail than perhaps other emotions they might have talked about. So let's just talk about emotions broadly again. So sometimes I like to say, or to see us as creatures in the sea. We're born into the world, but we're kind of at sea as far as our emotions are concerned. And emotions are kind of like waves that come along. And sometimes the seascape is favourable, or the weather's favourable, and there's not too much in the way of wave activity, and we can happily sort of bob along. But every now and then things get more difficult, and a bunch of waves of various sizes comes along and kind of positions us and forces us to deal with them. You can't just ignore them. So if we imagine emotions sweeping over us, they sort of have a kind of an attack side and then a crest, and then they go down the other side. That is kind of a feature of emotions. They don't last forever. Usually, matters of 10, 15, 20, 30 minutes for a lot of emotions. Some go on longer, but they all have kind of an attack and a decay, and even the longest emotions don't go on forever. So there you are at sea with varying levels of skill, having to deal with waves. So if we think about that sort of model, what can you do? When a wave comes along, if you're a sort of surfer, if we imagine ourselves we're going to try and surf these waves, that's probably being the best skill. We can't take them away, we can't change them very much. We have to deal with them in a clever and athletic manner. So you can obviously bail out, can't you? Surfers go off the crest of the wave and go down the back and just try and wait for the next wave. This would probably be called running away, or sticking your head in the sand, or some way of not dealing with the situation which is causing you to have a strong emotional reaction. And sometimes discretion is the better part of valour. I'll leave you to weigh that up. It's an option, but once you've decided on that option, there's not much more to be said. You will have to deal with the next wave, of course, so it does pay to get some skills at some stage. The next thing is, if you don't cope with the wave, if you don't actually try and deal with it, and it turns out to be kind of a dumper, as we used to call them, then you're going to get tossed in the surf, and you're going to be under the water, spinning around, perhaps struggling for breath, having a very unpleasant time, and perhaps lashing out or blaming someone else, blaming the wave. So that's not a very good option, although often it's what happens to us when we first encounter very strong emotions. And it's something, if you have children, you have to kind of help them deal with. They get overwhelmed by the emotion and they do all sorts of radical things that aren't really helpful to their position and annoy everybody else. But fortunately, there are parents who come along and have to sort of rescue the situation to some degree. So then more into the situation of what to do when you're actually going to tackle a wave as a surfer, let's say. How do you do that? Well, I think there's a few preparatory things you can do, knowing that this is going to occur. You are going to have waves of emotion in your life. Marcus Aurelius talked about this. He said, and I'm paraphrasing him, he wakes up in the morning and says to himself, I'm going to have to deal with frustrating, difficult, useless, irritating people during the course of the day, and better make the most of it, but it's definitely going to happen. So there's no point pretending that things are going to go smoothly. I've got to expect difficulties and frustrations, my job to deal with them, which I think is a good start to a day, even if it's not the most pleasant thought over your cornflakes as you crunch down on them, but it is a good idea to be prepared and to say these things happen. I guess the other phrase that Stoics use to deal with these sort of situations is amor fati, to love your fate. Things are going to happen to you during the day. You are going to have feelings about them, and on some days, probably not every day, you're going to have strong feelings about what's going on. And that is your fate. That is what happens to you, and you have to deal with it. Sometimes I like to say, rather than love your fate, which sounds a bit sort of warm and cuddly and smooth, I think sometimes it's better to relish your fate, to actually enjoy it, to actually enjoy the fact it's sort of spicy and tasty and, like a relish. That it's got good bits and difficult bits, but that's kind of the nature of relish. It's kind of spicy and flavoursome and hot and interesting, and that is the nature of life. It is kind of spicy and hot and flavoursome and interesting at times. A lot of times it's just cornflakes and milk. So if you're prepared for the fact that things are going to be difficult at times, then you're going to be less annoyed and less trying to evade dealing with waves of emotion when they occur. So the next thing then, when you have emotions come along, is to think about what you're actually trying to do. So, what are your main goals and aspirations that you're trying to achieve, in a longer term? Where are you trying to get to? What sort of profile are you trying to build up amongst people who are around you? How are you trying to achieve your goals, and what do you need to do next, I guess, in order to further that cause? Because really your major goals and your major plans and schemes are what needs to advance. And you shouldn't be too worried about the frustrations and difficulties that occur in the very short term. So keeping a track on yourself and a track that you are on track for your major goals and plans is well worthwhile, and not getting diverted into minor sort of side channels of frustration or people who annoy you and ending up dealing with them rather than doing what you really want to do. So this is obviously very important. Another way of getting through this, people often say these days, is, will it matter in 5 years' time? If what you're dealing with and are frustrated by, whatever way, it's not going to matter in 5 years. You shouldn't be getting churned up and worried and upset, frustrated and overly involved with it. You can deal with it in a perfunctory manner perhaps and move on. So that is a good test for the nature of the situation that you're trying to deal with, and I think it's a cardinal question to be asking when you get stuck in some troubles and you start to get frustrated. Obviously, if it is a major performance issue that is going to affect your position in 5 years' time, you're going to want to do your best and put your greatest effort in. But even then there can be frustrations, so making the most of those frustrations is kind of the trick. These things are sent to try us, and there's always some sort of way forward, and kind of you need to have that truckload of faith, as Lou Reed called it. You have to believe that there's some sort of way out of the situation or through this situation. If you stick to your goals and to your aspirations and your virtues and looking for that opportunity, looking for that moment to open up, perhaps someone else can help you if you're open to that. Perhaps a new opportunity will arise. So you need to maintain an open door towards your major goals, plans, and you're sticking to your virtue system. You need to think that that's going to be occurring, because one day, at one point in time, things will change. The door will be open, and something will be on the other side, and you'll have an opportunity to go through. But that, means maintaining a certain framework in your mind and a certain line of thought towards that. So what do you do if it all? So that's kind of this sort of surfy approach. So I guess the surfer is on the wave. He's really only got to deal with a bit of the wave he's on and kind of look for, or her, of course. They've only got to deal with the bit of the wave they're on. They look forward to how the wave's curling and where their general plan's going to take them. But you don't have to deal with the entire wave all the time, and it's probably best not to look at it because it might be quite scary and unhelpful, because if you're not going to be dealing with that stuff, don't look at it. So that is the way forward for most people. But it does go wrong. People do get dumped and caught up in all the troubles of that emotion. The wave dumps on them, they're all angry and sort of cursing and blaming other people and not functioning very well for a while. This does happen. It happens to all of us. I guess the thing is to recapture yourself, to keep that oversight of yourself where you're looking at yourself, the facts, what's happened, and as soon as you kind of realise that it's all gone horribly wrong, try and regather yourself. Apologise to people. They have worn it from you. Try and regather the situation. Take a step back. Perhaps let other people take control for a while of a situation where you kind of haven't done terribly well. Make it clear that that was a bit of a spaz out and that you didn't intend to act that way, and that you'd like to go on as best as possible and as well as normal as possible as you would. People can be remarkably forgiving if you are open to asking for their forgiveness and getting some feedback from them. People do generally want to work with you and generally want to make things work out. And I think everyone has a bad day, so others are receptive to working through that situation. And you too should be forgiving of other people when they, get caught up in their emotions, act irrationally, as Stokes would say, and act in a dysfunctional manner, which hasn't helped anyone. But you want to be open to the opportunity that they can regather themselves, they can apologise, some sort of redress about what's happened, review the situation and try and avoid the same mistakes in the future. So that sort of goes both ways. And we do need other people to give us feedback about what's happening for us, but people that we trust. So one of the things Seneca always talked about was that you've got to have good friends, and you trust your good friends, and you take careful feedback from them, and you learn and gain wisdom from them, and you understand yourself better. But you don't trust the general population. You don't have anyone just wander up to you and tell you what they think of you and respond to that. You need to be kind of a bit guarded about who you let yourself be open to. But mind you, if you do something unreasonable to a member of the general population, you should definitely apologise to them. So that's kind of it for today. It's just a brief touch on anger as an emotion. I might try and touch on some other emotions later, but it's kind of the cardinal emotion that gets people offside with everybody else and needs to be dealt with. And if you get the hang of dealing with your frustrations and irritability and anger and getting caught up in all that, then you're a long way down the line for dealing with any other emotions, which often have the same underlying pattern of responding to things. One thing I didn't say about this was the temperance, the timing. You want to time yourself well when dealing with emotions. So just like a surfer, you have to catch the wave at the right time or go over the back if you're not going to catch it. Timing is essential in dealing with emotions. Taking time and then striking at the right time. That's another factor in dealing with emotions and having things turn out for the best. So anyway, all that being said, thank you for watching. Please consider liking and subscribing, and we'll see you all again in a week's time, hopefully. Cheers.